sometimes we complicate our nutrition, and there are ways to make it simple and optimize it as much as possible. I have a guest today that is going to help me cover this very topic on nutrition and how can we simplify it, optimize it, and make it the most achievable when it comes to eating and improving your health. Welcome, Izzy, to my channel, and I am super excited to have a chat with you today.
Yes.
First thing that I wanted to know about you is what do you do and why you do what you do?
So probably like a lot of people, I did a lot of the crazy diet fads. You know, I tried all of the super low carb and I went super clean and macros, and I never really had any transformation, you know, which in hindsight, I think was really useful from a dietitian perspective because I didn't glom on to any one diet. I didn't ever have this life-changing experience. So I kept thinking I was going to figure out the answer or the best diet, and I never did. And so I got a little jaded with all of the different diet attempts, and I went on to get a master's in nutrition and become a licensed nutritionist. And I just wanted to help people understand the really basic principles about nutrition. You know, calories are a thing. We all need vitamin A. And to understand some underlying principles so that they can kind of put together their own simplified diet as opposed to kind of getting in that diet hamster wheel. I think the people that I serve the most are, I used to work for CrossFit, so I have a lot of functional fitness people in my community, and really people that want to be fit but also aren't professional athletes. You know, we're not making money off of our back squats and our pull-ups. We want to see improvements there, but we're really looking for a high quality of life and also a nutrition plan that will support the fitness that we do. So that's a little background.
It was a bit too brief, and I want to dig deeper into your why.
Yeah.
So why you do what you do?
I really enjoy giving people like the empowerment or the confidence that they don't need a nutrition coach. I think nutrition is so foundational to somebody's health that I want them to have the skill set that they can go out and do this on their own. So a lot of my programs, I think all of my programs involve a heavy educational component. Like my main program is a masterclass because I think having people understand enough of the why really will help them put all of the pieces together instead of just telling them, okay, follow these rules or hit these numbers or something like that. So I really get excited about when I have clients who don't need me anymore. As much as I like my clients, I actually don't want long-term nutrition clients because I get really fired up when they have the skill set to be able to do this on their own. I think there are a lot of things in our life that we're able to just go to a coach for. You know, I, for example, have an accountant because I can't keep track of all of that stuff. But because nutrition is so all around us all of the time and so much of a part of our life, I really think, or I really enjoy giving people that power that they can do this on their own.
Kind of born on the same day that they ask, okay, where is the dietitians or the coaches that really want your clients to succeed? And the skill sets that you mentioned is so important because that is one of the basic things that I talk to my clients as well. It's like, I don't want you to hang with me for the rest of your life. I ideally want to give you the skill sets and show you the way so you can do this for the rest of your life without needing anyone else to tell you what to do or be confused again choosing a trendy diet just because your best friend is doing it and it feels or it sounds good, but it's not really applicable for you. I kind of going through your background and your page, there was something that really caught my attention. That is something that you promote quite often, which is a 100-gram challenge. So what is it all about, and what is the foundation of that challenge?
Yeah, sometimes I think about whether or not I like that I use the word challenge in the name. There's so many different challenges out there that I think people think it's just another nutrition challenge. It's this 30-day thing and I'll just go back to my old ways, when really it was meant to be a daily challenge forever. And the whole premise is to eat 800 grams by weight of the fruits and vegetables of your choice. And then you continue to eat whatever else you want. So you don't have to cut out the chocolate or the wine. You continue to have your protein foods. But the idea is to really focus on adding enough of the healthy fruits and veggies to the diet. And the number came out of a study. So it was in 2017. It was a meta-analysis of a lot of different association studies looking at what happens to people's death risk and disease risk from their fruit and vegetable consumption. And no surprise, the risk of cancer and cardiovascular disease and mortality all went down at 800 grams. And so it was just at a point in my life when I was playing with different ideas and I saw that study and I thought, that's really interesting. What if I try to eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables each day with no other rules and restrictions and see what happens? And so I played with it for 6 months. And really, that's how the 800 gram challenge came to be. I wanted to look at the macros and what are the rules around it? And are beans allowed and potatoes? They are. But the whole idea is just to help people focus on this additive approach to the diet, adding the foods that we can't eat too much of, and really just giving people that foundation of whole unprocessed foods without that restriction.
Do you believe that there is such thing as food addiction, or like adding ultra processed foods to your diet can lead to that at some point?
Yeah, Ashley Gearhart, she's got a great paper out about this, and I'm hoping to interview her. I wouldn't consider myself a food addiction expert, but what I understand is I think right now people are willing to say it has addictive-like properties. Whether or not we can officially put it in the DSM manual and say that it's a true addiction, but there clearly is something about these foods that we tend to really just want to keep eating them. And I think you probably have this too with your clients. I feel like sometimes they think they're the only one. They'll kind of confide in you and they say, oh gosh, I have a really hard time with the sugary foods. And I'm like, you're like the 99.9% of us. And so I think there is something really interesting about them, that a lot of us have a hard time controlling the right quantity. And I don't like to vilify them, but a lot of times when people start adding enough fruits and veggies to their diet and not restricting that stuff, they find themselves so full on the fruits and veggies that they're able to moderate that stuff a little bit more without necessarily having to go to the step of weighing and measuring everything. Although that's a fine tool, but it's a nice way so that people can break free from the restriction mindset while also starting to get a little bit better balance in their diet.
There are 2 points you raised that are interesting. And one is you see these people usually restricting or eliminating things out of their diet rather than adding. And when we focus on adding rather than taking out, makes a huge difference in how sustainable the diet is. Mm-hmm. So we see people eliminating specific food groups, or just eliminating all carbs or all carbohydrates or their best favorite soul foods because they are considered in that realms of being bad. But when we actually think about, rather than taking that out, why don't you focus on improving or optimizing what you already can eat, or around what you eat, how can we make it better? Mm-hmm. Instead of making it just pointing out at foods that are bad for you. And I think that is very powerful. And with the adding of those 800 grams vegetables and fruit in weight is actually very beneficial. And if it's not 800 grams, maybe just from, I think you have heard about the 5 and 2 around rule that you add at least 5 serves of vegetable, 2 serves of fruit a day, and you should be good to go. And I guess it is people get such a hard time just adding more fruit and vegetables, and it sounds silly, but it's actually a struggle. Like I have clients that all the time when I look at the fiber intake, like they really struggle to get that up. And when it comes to just finding ways to make it easier or reduce the preparation time or just making it nicer for the person to enjoy something that they may not enjoy as much, is where the challenge becomes a little bit harder. So what are some of the strategies that you have implemented or recommended to your clients or anyone who follows you that wants to have a much better relationship with vegetables to actually add them into their diet more easily and more consistently?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is I have a pretty wide range of what I allow to be part of the 800 grams. So like I said, there's the fruits and veggies, but then I also do allow potatoes as long as they aren't commercially fried. I also allow beans. I also allow things like olives and avocado and corn, even fresh corn on the cob or frozen corn. And it's really because when you look at the caloric density of all of those items, they're so clearly different than anything like pretzels or anything that's fattening, right? So they're so low in calories relative to the volume that you're getting, and they're relatively high in the nutrients. And so I put a lot of things in there that people don't classically consider fruits or vegetables. So I think that helps too. When people learn, oh, potatoes count, that's a big deal. Thing besides the wide variety that's allowed is, you kind of said, getting people to eat more vegetables. I really push the fruit thing for people. I think there's so much dogma in social media land that fruit is too much sugar, that it's so nutritious, that I'm like, hey, they get so worried too. They're like, oh gosh, I'm eating too much fruit. And I'm like, no, you're not. If you love pineapple, if you love oranges, if you love mango, add all of that stuff to your diet. It's really healthy. It's not too much sugar. So that helps a lot of people too. There's a lot of fear around it. Like I said, like even clients know I'm going to say that, but when they actually go to, oh my gosh, I'm having 2 bananas today. That's one of my jokes on social media. They're really surprised that it's quite healthy for them. So those are 2 of the big things. A lot of varieties allowed. And then I really encourage them to eat the more fruit than they are. I think the third thing is just encouraging them to eat what they like. Kind of what you were saying, trying to pick up on what they're already kind of doing in their diet. Because I think there's also this idea that everybody needs to have kale every day to be healthy. And it's, if you don't like kale, have something else. And then I think the last thing that I would offer, I try to encourage my clients to make breakfast count. I think in our culture and a lot of cultures, a lot of times breakfast is sort of considered just the bagel or the croissant or the donut or something like that. And so to make sure that you're having some fruits or vegetables there really can make the target of 800 grams doable across the day.
That there is just one form of a type of breakfast, and like breakfast shouldn't look like something different. And when you add vegetables or stir fry to it, or maybe something similar that you ate last night, it's like, that is not breakfast. And like, whatever breaks your fast is breakfast. So it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you're able to optimize, increase fiber, have a much more nutrient dense meal. That's what it matters. And also, when you think about the typical eggs and bacon, or just the plain cereal with yogurt or something like that, it truly doesn't make the point of filling you up and getting you satiated. I've tried those things. I've tried having pancakes, and literally an hour later, I'm hungry, starving. Like, this doesn't fill up for me. I do have usually like a stir fry, about 800 grams of vegetables just for breakfast. And that fills me up for the rest of the day. And I can literally not think about food until 3-4 p.m. And I do that on purpose because I work in the hospital. So I have my biggest meal in the morning, and then I don't eat a whole really good meal again until 9 p.m. So I really have to focus on embracing a really good breakfast so I can manage my hunger, my appetite, and so I can just manage that better. And vegetables are like so filling. And when you think about potatoes, oh man, so many people fear potatoes or bread, and potatoes are just so amazingly filling, and they don't have as much calories as you think they are for the amount of weight you can eat from them and get some calories in. Literally, about 400 grams of potatoes will give you about 250 to 300 grams to 300 calories. Like, you eat 400, 500 grams, that's a lot of potatoes. And you can say, man, I'm full. And that if you ate the same equivalent amount of calories from rice, you would be eating just a tiny bit, not even a quarter of what you get from potatoes. So I can definitely see the value of having more of these high volume, nutrient dense foods in your diet. There was something that I also loved from your page, that you came with 10 principles for nutrition, and I would love to discuss one by one with you, which is very interesting. So the first one you mentioned is the quantity of food you eat determines your weight in terms of calories. So let's dig into that one a little bit deeper. So why is the quantity and not the quality that determines your weight?
This one's number one because I'm sure you have it too with your clients that weight goals have got to be the most common, right? Body composition or weight improvement. So no surprise, principle one to address that. But yeah, I mean, I think I was caught up in it too for years. You know, you hear this stuff that calories don't matter or calories in, calories out has been debunked. And so this is really showing, and you know, when I get into it more in my education and stuff like that, but this is really showing that calories and tracking calories are the basis of our weight gain and our weight loss, and that it hasn't been debunked. And that if you really want to change your weight, we have to ultimately change that relationship between calories in and calories burned. Yeah. Now, I think maybe where you were going with your question is, interestingly enough, when we tend to focus on higher quality foods, like something like the 800-gram challenge, we often can affect our total quantity, but still at the end of the day, what's changing our weight is what that total quantity is, yeah, in calories.
Coming also from the point of a lot of people, they think they eat healthy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
because something that is healthy, well, then that doesn't count. Or like if they consume 3,000 calories from potatoes because they're healthy, they're not going to gain weight. So it's not just about the quality, it's definitely the quality when we think about like people, oh, well, I just add more avocado, but because avocado is healthy, that doesn't count, or nuts. And then when you start thinking about the composition of the food, even though is a good quality, we're having nutrient dense foods, that doesn't mean they don't have calories, and every calorie will add up at the end if you eat a lot of it.
Yes.
So that's where we're coming from. So obviously quantity matters, quality matters too, but quantity is going to determine your weight.
Totally.
Now, the second point you mentioned here was the quantity of your food in macronutrients determines your body composition.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you probably know some of the internet discussions, lively discussions that, you know, calories don't matter, macros are more important, or all of that stuff, or calories matter, macros don't. And so this is trying to help people understand that we can talk about quantity in terms of calories and macronutrients, and they're not one and the same, but they are related. And if you really want to optimize your body composition, we need to look at the total quantity you're eating relative to the macronutrient distribution of it. And oftentimes that is going to heavily rely on getting enough calories from protein to really maximize our body composition. But to some degree, I would also say we have to take a look at carbs to make sure that we're able to fuel the exercise, to be able to also train at the level that we want to maybe fuel that lean mass. But it's understanding that, yeah, if we want a little bit more precision in the diet, especially related to body composition and not just our weight, we are going to have to take a deeper look at where those calories are coming from in terms of their macronutrients.
It's very key, especially for those that when we are assessing their diets, I don't know if that is your case as well, but 85% of the times I onboard a new client, they are under 80 protein. Like this is like all the time. And this is one of the biggest things that we need to focus on. And this is not just for females. I work with males too, and they struggle too to just get enough protein. And I say, like, look, let's just plan a range for your protein targets. So let's look at what would be the minimum amount I would want you to eat, and see whether that we can start from at least from that minimum amount and try to meet together there, because sometimes they are under eating even below that minimum range. And it's like, let's try to compromise, and let's get you to start with that minimum amount of requirement, and then try to build up to the happy medium or a little bit higher, or your maximum, which would be ideal as long as we start losing weight and dropping your calories. We want to retain that lean body mass. Obviously, it becomes a little bit less important, not saying that it's not important if you have a lot of weight to lose, because your body fat is going to be sparing that lean muscle if you, let's say, are in a very big calorie deficit, especially at the very beginning. But it doesn't make sense to completely discard that you have to have a good amount of protein from the very set go. So what are the ranges that you tend to use for you to recommend protein?
Yeah. I also just want to add on, one of the reasons I love it is for what you said, the retention of the lean mass. But I think also for our dieting clients, it helps them feel full, right? So I love that as a lever too. It's kind of two birds with one stone there, But yeah, I put out the number that I really like to recommend is the 0.7 grams per pound, or about the 1.6 grams per kilo, as my sort of like, hey, let's make sure that we're consistent there. And especially for my more, I call them recreational athletes, just like I am. Yes, I weightlift, but I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not going to win any awards. I think we can do a lot of great things there. But I do also encourage people up to 1 gram per pound, especially the more muscle they are, or the more that they're really looking for significant mass gain. So yeah, so that 0.7 to 1, or the 1.6 grams per kilo up to the 2.2 grams per kilo.
Very, very similar. I do sometimes have to go slightly lower.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't say that the client would be able to reach that number. And in a hospital, obviously, I think they stuck with like the old system, and the maximum they recommend is 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Well, this is still very low, but well, let's use that as a starting point. If we need to use 1.5, 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, but ideally, I try to encourage to boost that number over 100 grams. Like to any of my clients, I don't want to get you or seeing you eating less than 100 grams. Yeah. Like that is like my non-negotiable. Whatever you're eating, no less than 100 grams of protein. And from there, we start from there to your optimal number. Now let's go to the third principle that we talk about, which is timing only matters to the extent it affects quantity. So what do you want to add to that?
Yeah. I find that a lot of people worry too much about when they're eating versus getting the total quantity right each day. And I could be talked into some certain circumstances where people have to be a little bit more aware of that, particularly 2-a-day athletes who are looking for performance in both sessions. But sometimes I still wonder how much that matters, especially once you consider that they're going to have to hit a total quantity at the end of the day. If they don't eat in between the sessions, how the heck are they actually going to get to those targets anyway? So sometimes I think we're trying to micromanage all of this stuff. I know that there's people who are interested in, optimizing muscle mass and MPS and all of that stuff. I just don't think that we have the research to say that these really specific protocols definitively will put you in a better place than just increasing your protein and being consistent with it and training hard. Especially, again, for my clientele. If I was working with bodybuilders who are at some professional level and this is their career, okay, we're going to do everything under the sun that might give us that 1%. I'm working with people who, yes, could be relatively very fit, but we're also still not making money off our athletics. And so I don't like to put in a lot of rules that I don't think we have the evidence for. And so at the end of the day, for most people, at least in my opinion, it's going to come down to getting that total quantity right and potentially optimizing it to that 1 gram per pound versus worrying about, did I have it at 9 and every 4 hours and after a workout, and did I have my casein before bed and all of that stuff.
I totally agree. I think it is just digging into the minors when you definitely can just optimize by just being consistent with a regular timing that works for you, that you can stick to, that you can do it regularly. And that's basically what you need to just work around, rather than focusing on strictly, oh, well, I have to have breakfast at 9 a.m. and then lunch at 12 p.m. Like, it doesn't really work that way. You can be more flexible, see timing as ranges of time if you want to kind of have a relatively decent structure or much more consistent routine. But you don't have to be on the clock to do everything that you're supposed to do, because you're not a robot. You're not, your organism and your physiology doesn't work that way. So I totally agree with you in that sense. The other point that you mentioned is number 4, the quality of food as determined by macronutrient density determines your health. So I love this one, but I want to hear your point from that.
Yeah. I do feel like I have to say that all of these principles, I love them, but they're all not perfect and they all have some nuance. And so when I say that the quality of your food as determined by micronutrients determines your health, as you know, the quantity also is part of your health picture. Like if we overeat calories and macronutrients, this can be detrimental to our health. And so this one is just talking about micronutrients, and it's kind of not really talking about quantity. And so I just like to point that out, that I am aware that quantity does affect health. But when we think about, quality of life and health, if we focus on kind of what we were saying earlier on these nutrient dense foods, on foods that give us lots of vitamins and minerals and fiber, and even phytochemicals, which we don't really know what they're doing, but we think they're health protective. If we focus on that and get all of these high quality nutrients, they seem to be associated with health. And so that's really what this principle is getting after, that time and time again, when we focus on getting those nutrient dense foods, we probably are going to put ourselves in a better health outcome. And to be honest, that's the research that the 800 gram challenge number came from, right? That we talked about earlier.
Corroborates the idea that the more you optimize the quality of the food choices that you have, the more likelihood that you will be in a much better health position. Mm-hmm. One, because you are reducing the deficiencies that you probably are more likely at risk, especially if you're dieting or if you're eating fast foods or ultra processed foods that they just don't have the amount of nutrients your body needs in order to function optimally on a daily basis. So when you pick up a client that is been doing a very suboptimal diet for several years or for several months, or just chronically yo-yo dieting up and down, you can see how their macronutrient deficiency shows up in their lack of energy. Mm-hmm. There's not enough iron, there's not enough B12, there's not enough magnesium, zinc in the blood. And obviously the only way that you can know that is doing a blood test and checking whether there is an actual deficiency for you to probably go one step beyond and recommend supplementation. But just by doing the simple stuff, like let's just add more vegetables in, let's add just more nutrient dense, we are already getting a step ahead, to reduce or modify these deficiencies that already could be pre-existing before they even start working with you or before we even look into the blood test. And once you do that again, the same blood test 6 months later after optimizing their diet, there's no deficiencies. And their energy is better, their performance is better, the recovery is better. So all of these things come back to nutrient quality, nutrient density, and how that relates to micronutrient composition. So I really like that you point that out.
I'm glad you mentioned that about your observation on the performance and the energy, because when I first launched the 800 gram challenge in my CrossFit background, most of the comments I got from the CrossFitting community was their performance in the gym was better, their recovery was better. And I think they were a little bit surprised because so many times athletes are focused on the protein and the carbs. And it's like, no, these micronutrients are really helpful for performance and energy.
The same as eating 50 grams of lollies or gummies,
right?
Versus having the same 50 calories from fruit or vegetables or something like that. Or if we're trying to optimize nutrition, let's say I'm thinking, obviously timing and digestion matters. And obviously you won't have a banana while running marathon necessarily, although that can happen. I've seen, especially in certain stations, they offer some pieces of banana or things that are very easy to consume. That are not a super high intensity, but they are going to go for a long time. So at least you're having something in your stomach. But also like fiber content plays a little bit of a role when it comes to mitigating certain accidents when you're doing some kind of a sport event or something that you can't stop to go to the toilet. So it all these things play a big role, but it's more just looking at the big picture and how certain foods and nutrient-dense foods can probably have much better impact on your performance and recovery than just a simple ultra-processed foods like a gummy or lolly or something that is going to be a fast-acting sugar that will help you to mitigate like hypoglycemia in certain sports that require a lot of energy and use a lot of glucose available in your blood, and that helps you recover faster. But at the end of the day, when we're not going into the specifics of a sport, but just looking at the bigger and broader picture, then just go for the nutrient-dense foods that are always going to be much better and provide way more benefits at the end of the day.
Totally.
Let's move to the next one. Okay, so the fifth principle you said is it is never one thing. Let's talk about it.
I think it might be my favorite one, because we tend to latch on to, okay, that's the answer. Oh, I just need to do more protein, or I just need more calcium, or I just need more fiber. When we've already spent this time talking about the fact that, oh, calories matter and the macronutrient distribution matters, and oh, we have all these micronutrients, and oh, there's fiber. So it's reminding people that within nutrition, there's many different endpoints that we have to get right in our diet. It's not just one nutrient, it's not just one focus. But then we can also take a step back even wider and think about, okay, let's say we have a performance goal or even a health goal. It's not just nutrition. It's going to be your sleep. It's going to be your stress. It's going to be your training. It's going to be other lifestyle factors that all come into the outcome that you want. And so it's to try to keep people from getting too obsessive about any one thing. And anytime that you think you've found the single answer, you probably need to take a step back and reassess the whole picture.
I love that, because it is very true. We focus on blame or even blaming the one thing. Oh, if you eat processed meat, or if you only eat meat, you're going to get cancer. Like, it is not just about the meat.
Totally.
It's about your lifestyle. It's about your habits. It's about whether you actually consume vegetables, fiber, and fruit within your diet. It's not to blame one macronutrient or one specific food. So that's where we come back to this very amazing, I said a statement, like, they're not bad foods or good foods. They're all in a spectrum. Yes, there are foods that are more nutrient dense and higher fiber and higher in micronutrients, and there are foods that are lower in this. But that doesn't mean that if you eat one donut or if you eat meat, they are going to cause you to be sick or reduce your longevity or your quality of life. It is all about the context and how we live our lives, how we do things, our habits, our behaviors, our mindsets, our environment. All of these things play a role. So I love that statement, because yes, it is never one thing. Also, when we think about, oh, it's my hormones. Or like you're blaming the reasons why you're not achieving something is because you gotta blame something. Or it's just because I'm weak, or I'm too weak and I just can't stop eating fruit or lollies, or like, you're not too weak. There's probably a reason, and we just need to dig deeper in that reason and understand why you're doing that in the first place. So it's also like trying to take that pressure on our clients that there's something wrong with them. That is something that is preventing them to move forward. It's not. There's nothing wrong with your body. There's nothing wrong most of the times. I don't say that not always the case, but most of the times we go and look at the blood panel test, the metabolic test, and everything comes normal. So it's like, well, nothing is wrong with you. Now, what we have to do is just be consistent and trust the process. The problem is that we are too impatient and we want things to happen super fast, especially when it comes to fat loss or seeing results. It makes sense for us to want to see results faster because we're putting in the work, we're trying to show up. Calorie deficit, let's be honest, it sucks. I hate calorie deficit, but it is something that is going to be part of the process, and we just need to stick to it long enough for us to be able to see those results. So totally. I love that statement. I think that's my favorite.
Yeah. It's most people's favorite.
Let's move to the next one, and it says all diets control quantity to varying levels of precision. So what would you want to say about that one?
Yeah, and I think some of my early days, I didn't really understand this. I thought intermittent fasting was so different than low carb, and was so different than keto, and it was so different than, I don't even know what else, counting calories. And they're really not. I mean, most every diet is trying to have you cut calories with different rules. Some of
Yeah.
them take out certain foods. Some of them, like the 800-gram challenge, might add certain foods. Some of them have you count aspects of your diet. Some of them have you count all of your diet. And so obviously any diet that's going to have you totally track macros or calories is at the far end of precision. It's the most precise. But then anything else that's not having you really weigh and measure, they're all variable of how accurate they are in terms of total quantity in the diet. And I think this helps people understand, oh, why did my friend have such good results on intermittent fasting and I didn't? Or why did my friend have such good results on keto and I didn't? And it's because we're not really controlling the variable that controls your result. And so we just have a very variable outcome from all these different diets because we're not taking account for all the stuff that we're eating.
Yeah, and what I like about that one is that at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about the diet per se. Like there's nothing special about the diet. It's mostly because they all controlling a variable that is making you get into a calorie deficit somehow. And that calorie deficit leads to the results you're seeing. The variable, or the one thing that seems to be or make those diets popular is because they work for that particular population. They just liked, or they felt like it was the least restrictive way to achieve a calorie deficit. It just felt easier. So if you're someone who finds difficult to eat and maintain a diet with adding carbohydrates in your diet, because then you want to, you start craving more of them, for you probably going into a paleo diet or a low carb diet is going to mitigate or reduce all these temptations, and it's going to make you be more focused, and that will create a calorie deficit. So you didn't lose weight because you stopped eating carbohydrates. You lost weight because you stopped eating things that you were overeating before, and now you're no longer overeating them. So now you can be in a calorie deficit. So it's not about anything special about the low carb diet or paleo diet or whichever diet we see out there. It's mostly about what is the one form of dieting that feels least restrictive for you, that you feel that can be more sustainable at the end of the day. Definitely. Now, the other one that you mentioned here is sustainability is the most important factor in diet selection. And that kind of like links with the other one that we just said.
That's what I was going to say. I think you summarized that really well. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing is if you want results in the long term, we're going to have to do this diet, whatever you end up picking forever. And I think it's trying to help people understand that we're not looking for results for 30 days only. In theory, we're looking for results for years. So we got to be able to stick to it for years. So yeah, I think the other thing though I would add about that principle that sustainability is the most important factor for diet selection, it's not saying that whatever you're doing, just sustain it forever. Because if you want to change, you have to change something you're doing. So there's this balance there of what's the most sustainable level of change, which I think is kind of, what you summarized so well, but you can't just sort of just keep doing what you're doing and expect different results. We do have to change something, but we want to do the least amount of change or whatever the amount of change that we feel that we can stick to, and that's going to lead to those results.
What did you said about sustainability as well as like we are living creatures and we adapt and we like change. Like you probably will love eating potatoes for 3 years, but suddenly you're just like, I'm kind of like sick of eating potatoes. I want to change. And now you stop your potato diet and then, I just want to eat more bread. So we are able to change things over time, but it's still being sustainable as long as you can stick to it for a long time and you don't feel like there is something that is taking out from your nutrition or feeling very restrictive that is going to drive a rebounding behavior or a rebel behavior, because this is what I did. Like you restricted your diet or certain food for so long then that when you have the time or you no longer have the willpower, you overeat them or you binge on them because you just can't hold it anymore. So that's what we want to prevent. If anything that you can have can feel good, you feel in control, and provides you with that confidence that you can sustain it for long term, then that's amazing. That's what we want.
Yes, yes.
Next principle you talked about here, the universal diet problem is processed foods. So what do you want to talk about in this one?
Yeah, maybe you can correct me, but I've yet to have the client who's overeating spinach and lean turkey breast. You know, most of the time, what we have to control in the diet are these processed foods, and our food environment makes it very difficult. But that's the problem for our health. That's the problem for our weight and body composition goals. It's that we tend to be overeating those items. And so I think with all of the diet noise out there, it's easy again to latch on this one idea. Okay, maybe it's just that I'm having gluten or it's dairy in my diet, when at the end of the day, the universal problem for our diets is processed foods.
I want to try to clarify for those who are maybe watching and say, well, let's define processed foods, because at the end of the day, I know what you mean, and you know what you mean. But a lot of people will come to you and say, well, what is a processed foods? Because everything is processed to a certain extent. Like anything that is being touched by men is going to be processed somehow. But what makes process actually, let's say, more like the ultra processed foods? What makes it a little bit more of a tricky type of composition versus our natural like created foods grown from the ground, or like just naturally occurring, compared to the handmade, man-made, or modified that we know? Because when we go to the supermarket, like even the lettuce that we see there, or the packages that it's being like vegetables that are ready to eat, have been washed and been cleaned up, and they are just ready to eat and pick up, you're still eating natural and relatively low processed foods, because they are just being made in a way that they facilitating the process of meal prepping, but that doesn't mean they still very healthy. So that is process, but not the way you're trying to describe it. I know what you mean. But let's explain a little bit more. What do you mean by processed foods or ultra processed foods versus processed meat?
I like that you're using the term ultra processed. There seems to be some consensus around that in the literature a little bit, with those definitions of that. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways for me about the processed food that I'm saying is the caloric density. You know, when you start to look at, again, the fruits and vegetables, you're going to be less than 1 calorie per gram, or somewhere around 1 calorie per gram. When you start to look at things like ice cream or crisps or stuff like that, you'll be close to 4-5 calories per gram. So that's a big one. And then another way that I like to define it for people are foods that, you know, are snack foods that we don't make in our own kitchen. You know, the chocolate covered pretzels and the chips that are somehow way more crispy than if I were to ever make homemade chips, and all of those things that with the additives that we don't really know what those names are. That doesn't mean that the additives are harmful for us, but it means that they've come up with this mixture of foods which has this caloric density and this addictive like quality that we tend to overeat. And so it's really hard with food, as you know, to make these black and white rules. But I think with those couple descriptors of like, hey, a ton of calories, things you can't make in your own kitchen, really the snacky foods that you're going to overeat, it's like, okay, that's what you mean when you say processed.
Yeah, and I would add, very likely they're very low in fiber, very low in micronutrients, and very low in protein for the most part. And sometimes I go one step further and say they are very likely to have these bliss points. And I guess this is what the food companies work a lot on, which is that the perfect combination between sugar, salt, and fat, and how that just makes it such a beautiful point for that particular food to taste really, really good. And that's what is called the bliss point. And I think that's very, very perfectly structured and built in these ultra processed foods. They just make you to want more of those foods.
Yes, they do.
Next point. Your diet can't be validated. This is what a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the main thing I'm trying to convey here is health risk. We all have health risk, no matter what we do with our diet, no matter how perfect paleo or how well I total my macros or whatever. I can't totally prevent cardiovascular disease, cancer, you name it, you fill in the blank. Why? Because it's never one thing. There's things like genetics that matter. There's things like our lifestyle that matter. So your diet can't be validated, meaning you can't show me, okay, this is what I'm eating, am I okay? This is sort of answering that question. I used to get this, I don't know how many times you would get this as a dietitian, but people would want to show you their food log and be like, is this okay? Or they'd say, well, I eat paleo, but I have wine on Saturday, is that okay? And you're like, we generally know that eating more whole foods than not is associated with better health in the long term, but that's about all we can tell you. We can't tell you, or we can't guarantee an outcome from your diet. Sure, I can maybe guarantee or help a little bit with weight and body composition to a better extent, but it's helping people understand that there's risk, and we just control our level of risk to within the realm of possible based on our genetics, but it's unknown. We don't have a guarantee there.
I totally agree with that one. Now, let's move to the next one. And this is the last one for our 10 top principles, which is there are diminishing returns or attaining perfection, which is my favorite. But I want you to talk to us about this one.
Well, you might be better to talk about this, because this really has to do with leaning out, which I think you're working on for your upcoming show, right? And the calorie deficit and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've had the clients too who are looking for these goals, and I don't think they're totally appreciating the level of effort that's going to take to get to some goals. And it would typically be, in my case, working with somebody who under all standards would be considered lean, but they want to lean out. It's definitely kind of going into what I would consider a more bodybuilding realm than necessarily a health realm. And it's kind of making people aware how precise it is. And every time that you want to get more lean, or even a slightly better performance, like the more advanced you get along those scales, the harder it is. I mean, the work to optimize something is so exponential based on just getting started. And so it's helping people understand that you want to have a six-pack. Okay, we can do it. It's going to be really, really, really grueling. I'm not sure that you want to.
That I think one thing that I love about this statement is also that consistency matters more than perfection, because there's nothing about trying to nail things perfectly 100% for the first 3 days of your diet. And because you did it so perfectly, you feel like you did enough, or your willpower runs out, or you start getting burnt out after 3 months, after 2 months of trying to be super strict, super perfect, and not allowing for sometimes being able to just slow down or do 40%. Sometimes at the end of the day, every 1%, like Atomic Habits pretty much presents, is like every 1% or 0.5%, whatever you do, you're still showing up and is adding up to the end results. Even if you're not at the same speed all the time, it doesn't mean like you're not going to get to the end goal, as long as you don't give up, as long as you don't stop. You can just go lower and sprint sometimes when you feel like very empowered, really good. I'm in a good mood, let's crush this. But sometimes you get sick. Sometimes you're not feeling your 100%. And you still feel like you are expected to show up 100%, because that's the only way we're programmed. You either do all or nothing, nothing in between. So I've always I actually came up with this no long ago and say, why not change this all or nothing for all or something? Just do one little thing, just something. And that, even if it's just a fifth of what you should be doing, you're still making or putting that little sprinkle of intention and work towards what you want to achieve. And you're definitely going to make much more progress if you keep going, even if you slow down, versus completely saying, fuck it, I'm done. And then you stop completely for 3 months. And then you go to your old life, to your old behaviors, to your old routine because it felt more comfortable. But you could have just done a little bit less from the very beginning, and it wouldn't have been so overwhelming, and you could have kept going. So
Yeah.
I think
wonder
that
that.
was my favorite because I love that mindset. That mindset.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. I mean, I do wonder all the time of all the time that people waste when they go off the diet, right? They thought they had to be perfect and then they waste the 3 weeks or the 3 months because they were off the diet. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you just accepted that you messed up and you got back to it, we'd be at your goal by now.
That is so true. Well, Izzy, I am so, so happy that we were able to have this call, this conversation. I am sure that a lot of people are going to benefit from this, if not, they have already. I appreciate you. It was awesome to have you, and I'll see you very soon.
Yes. Thank you so much. It was so good to connect with you. I'll see
It
you
was
on
awesome.
Instagram. Take care. Bye.